On the 11th of December 2019, the government of Saudi Arabia launched the initial public offering of the Saudi Aramco Corporation onto the Tadawul Public Stock Exchange. The company's initial offering actually went quite well after an unprecedented marketing campaign, which before this event was pretty much unheard of. On the second day of trading, the company hit a market capitalization of $2 trillion, easily eclipsing even Apple, Amazon, and Microsoft to go on and become the single most valuable company in history. This wasn't wild speculation gone mad either. The company had a comprehensive plan to ensure solid returns to investors, and even before it was released to the public, it was still the most profitable company the world had ever seen, bringing in $110 billion in 2019, which was close to double that of the next closest competitor, Apple Computers, that only brought in a paltry $60 billion. This channel has never explored an existing company before, and outside of the Dutch East India Company, this will only be the second company that we've ever looked at specifically. But there is a reason why. This corporation is so gargantuan in size that it is probably more impacted by external macroeconomic forces than it is by internal management decisions. The transacting capital of this institution surpasses all of that but the largest countries in the world. But it's not all roses. After its second day of trading, the stock price of Saudi Aramco has experienced a slow and painful decline. This, coupled with the ongoing turmoil in the securities market around the world and the oil price war, the initial public offering of Aramco may very well be the biggest financial flop in history, only marginally surpassing cats. An initial public offering is something that you may very well have heard of thrown around in financial news articles or even in movies like Wolf of Wall Street, and for the most part, most of you watching are pretty up to speed with what it is. But in brief, it is still important to understand the life cycle of a company. A company gets founded, perhaps in someone's garage, and it will get funded from the founder's own pocket, or perhaps friends and family will chip in to make the idea happen. If this actually goes well and the business starts operating with customers and suppliers, then it will attract the interest of investors that specialize in these kinds of startup companies. If that all goes well, then they will get to play in the big leagues, which is opening up your share offering to anybody with a brokerage account on a public market. This all makes a lot of assumptions. For starters, it massively simplifies the process of seed capital and then multi-series funding, but the big one is it also assumes that these companies actually need investment to keep on growing, which isn't always the case. On one extreme, we have companies like Amazon that didn't actually turn a profit for the first 2 decades of their operation, but some companies can grow off their own steam. And today, some of the largest companies in the world are not listed on any public stock exchanges. Companies like Cargill, Koch Industries, the Big Four accounting firms, and even IKEA. they have all remained private and have still grown to be the massive companies that we know and hate today. Now, Saudi Aramco was a state-owned oil corporation that was making hundreds of billions of dollars in profit every year. Why on earth would they need to go public? The short answer is, they didn't. They absolutely did not need any of the money it raised from listing itself on a public stock exchange. And the other thing to know is that it only listed 5% of the total shares of the entire corporation, with the other 95% to be retained by the royal government of Saudi Arabia. But despite all of this, the initial public offering of the company had a marketing budget that put AAA blockbusters to shame, which is really odd. I mean, when was the last time you saw an ad on TV about a company going public? Likely, never. It's just not that type of product. Investors that are in the market for IPO stock are going to know what is coming up. They will do their own research and they are not going to be swayed one way or the other by some highway billboard. To make things even weirder on top of that, all of the money that was raised during this IPO was not going to be used to be reinvested into the company like every single other IPO ever. It was instead going to be used by the government to invest into other projects, like building some infrastructure, but most importantly, building up a sovereign wealth fund. We have explored the idea of a sovereign wealth fund before on this channel with the economy of Norway, another oil-rich nation, which is today home to the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world. These funds are like insurance policies for the future when the oil runs out or becomes a worthless commodity that the world no longer relies on. Saudi Arabia was a little bit late to the party on building up this wealth fund for two main reasons. One was that it was a much less developed country than Norway was when it discovered oil, so it had to invest into all of this stuff that would make it a proper developed country first, before it started socking money away. The other was that it was probably a little bit more irresponsible with the money, and a lot of that money was spent on supercars and super yachts before the extensive royal family turned around and said, oh yeah, we better start planning for the future. Now, the government has actually marketed this IPO as a way for citizens of the nation to share in the wealth of the nation as it grows into the future, and people have even been encouraged to take out mortgage-style investment loans in order to buy into the company in the same way that any other national government might encourage its citizens to take out a loan to, buy a house. Which leads us on to the final major point to note about this initial public offering. It wasn't very public. The IPO was originally slated to be open to international investors, but they didn't see much in the way of international demand for stock in a company that has very little room left to grow, in a declining industry, in a region that's not super famous for political stability. Shocking, I know. So, it was really only open to the citizens of the nation. Foreign investors could still buy in if they really wanted to, but it involved a huge workaround. The thing that made this all the more limiting is the stock exchange it was listed on. The Tadawul Stock Exchange is the national stock exchange of Saudi Arabia, and it's similar in many ways to any other stock exchange in the world. Even the really big ones you're probably more familiar with, like the New York Stock Exchange or the Nasdaq. But the thing is, the Tadawul is not a big exchange. Exchanges like the Nasdaq can service companies like Apple, Amazon and Microsoft because they have lots and lots of registered brokers and huge capacity for trading volumes and a much more active pool of buyers. Listing the largest company in the world on a small, regional stock exchange was kind of like trying to sell a Bugatti Chiron at a Midwestern second-hand Ford dealership. It just really wasn't the right market.